Hi, everybody. I'm Chris Baty, and I am on Figma's UX writing team. And this is us. This is our team. In a minute, you will hear from Sylvie and Schmidt. And Ryan put a ton of thought and work into this presentation, but then unfortunately couldn't be here today. Um, but you will feel Ryan's presence emanating out from every nook and cranny of this presentation. So when we started to think as a team about what we wanted to say at Config, we came up with a lot of terrible ideas. So the first was a kind of like interactive, maybe competitive content design session. Bad idea. Next was this kind of short-lived idea of maybe commandeering Figma's entire product roadmap. And we would build dozens of features for content designers and UX writers, and we would ship them during this talk. And that one ran into some logistical issues right away. But then we all loved this idea of maybe doing something for our closest creative partners, product designers. And so one of the reasons we love that idea so much is that UX writing is on the product design team here at Figma. We spend a ton of time with these amazing folks, and we have so much awe and love and empathy for them. And one of the reasons we feel that way is because there are a lot of cooks in the product design kitchen. So there are product managers, there are engineers, and there are data scientists and researchers and so many more. And then about a year and a half ago, a new group of cooks showed up in the kitchen. So that was us. Sometimes we call ourselves content designers, sometimes we call ourselves UX writers, but our discipline focuses on the words that you see and hear when you're signed into a product. And we showed up in the product here with a lot of thoughts about things like conversational language and cohesive, consistent terminology and voice and tone. And we also showed up unafraid to ask the really tough questions like, does this weird toast that shows up a lot in product need punctuation? And actually, we are a team divided on this one. So if you have any thoughts, please help us settle it by finding us on Twitter, letting us know what you think. Anyway, back to this question of the missing manual that we teased at the start of the talk. So you as a product designer are already wrangling so much cross-functional input and feedback. And you already have, or you likely will soon have, a group of word nerds who are showing up in your Figma file and wanting to build stuff with you. And it's kind of awesome, but also maybe kind of awkward. And part of the awkwardness, I think, is just because there's not a real manual on how to work with UX writers. So we made one. Not a real manual, which would have taken a lot of work. No, it's the 20-minute talk that you're listening to right now. But we hope that it's like a fun, inspiring start and gives you some new ideas on how to have like a more productive and blissful relationship with the writer in your life. So before we get into that, though, I need to offer a disclaimer. So the ideas that we're about to share have worked really well for Schmidt and Sylvie and Ryan and I, both at Figma and at other companies where we've worked. But not every team works the same way. And there are no like absolute rules for the way this stuff can work, except for the ones we're about to share today. These are absolutely, unassailably true in 1,000% of circumstances. And we guarantee that this will work for you and make your life better, or we will refund the price of your config admission. All right, you ready to get started? I will hand it over to Sylvie, and I'll see you again in about 15 minutes.
Hi, I'm Sylvie, a UX writer at Figma. I'm going to talk a little bit about life before Figma and why we're talking about the opportunities for designers and UX writers to collaborate in Figma today. First, you might be asking why this manual that Chris mentioned is even necessary. Product designers own designs, UX writers own copy, and we just got to piece them together, right? That's actually how a lot of products and features were built before multiplayer design tools like Figma, and before people started recognizing UX writing as a design discipline. We used to have to work separately because that's how our tools and often our teams and organizations operated. Working asynchronously and in silos meant we wasted a lot of time just getting on the same page and copy pasting from one file to another. For example, at one of my previous roles, I couldn't edit copy directly in a designer's file. So I'd take screenshots of every frame, place them into a spreadsheet, and then add all the UI strings into a separate column. And then the designs would change based on decisions made in meetings that I wasn't even in. So I'd update my spreadsheet again and again and again, until I eventually just left my body entirely. Not only was it inefficient, inconsistent, and prone to errors, it also didn't allow for true UX collaboration between me and my product designers. As you'll hear later in this talk, there's a lot of strategy, design, and product sense that UX writers bring to the table through the lens of language and information. Figma has been a game changer for UX writers to ideate and iterate on real copy and real designs, shaping the UX and information design of products and experiences. And looking beyond the final strings, which of course should be clear, human, and aligned with brand voice, UX writers also have a rich toolkit, which includes new user experience flows, naming and terminology, user journey mapping, information architecture, and much more. We have the opportunity to translate those skills and build relationships within a robust design tool like Figma, but a little help from our expert design partners goes a long way in making that happen. So next, I'll kick it over to Schmidt so he can share his tips for fostering relationships and collaboration between product designers and UX writers in Figma.
Hi, thanks, Sylvie. I'm Schmidt. I'm a UX writer here. I work on FigJam, and today I want to talk about your relationship, but not that one. I actually want to talk about your relationship with the UX writers you work with. Take it from me, it is hard for UX writers to figure out how they fit in, because oftentimes you're the only UX writer on the team, and maybe the team's never had a UX writer before, and so nobody knows how to work with you. They don't know when to loop you in. You're not invited to meetings. It is tough. But the good news is there are a few things that designers can do to make the UX writers' lives they work with way better, to help them be their best selves and fit in and do great work. And so I want to talk about those things. I want to talk about 5 ways you can make the relationship with UX writers great. Cool. Number 1. This is really simple, but I have to say it because it's so important. Please give your UX writers edit access to your Figma files. I've included a screenshot of the UI, but you know how to do this. UX writing is design work. And just like it'd be hard for you to do your design work from like the comments of a file, it's hard for writers to do that too. Sometimes I think people don't totally believe this, or maybe don't know what UX writing work looks like. And so I wanted to give you an example. Picture this. You're a UX writer and you've been asked to rewrite this dialog box. Pretty simple. It's a dialog box about moving a meeting, and it tells you a bunch of people will be notified about moving the meeting. And you've been asked to rewrite it because users are kind of upset, or they didn't expect so many notifications to get sent out. Maybe somebody's like boss's boss's boss got 1,000 notifications from a calendar and was upset. So rewrite it so it's more clear. Easy, right? It's not. This one's not very easy actually, because the problem with this dialog box is not the writing. The problem is that this one dialog box is doing a little too much work. And so if you're a UX writer and you're asked to rewrite this, your job is actually to suggest something totally different. Your job is to say, hey, what if we split this thing up? Like maybe we should split into 3 parts. So there's one part where you get to move the meeting, another part where you get to send the notifications, and then a confirmation of the whole thing. Each piece of info gets its chance to sort of shine. This is what you should do. Instead of rewriting that, you should suggest these changes. There's this misconception that UX writing is about writing clear, simple copy, and that's just wrong. That's not what UX writing is. If you do your job well as a UX writer, then that's what comes out the other end, I guess. But UX writing, the work of it, is actually about making it possible to describe things simply and clearly. And the way that you make it possible is often by redesigning things, by rethinking them. That's UX writing. That's what a UX writer does. And it's very hard to do that, all of that stuff from the comments. So please give your UX writers edit access. That's number 1. Number 2, show them the ropes, show them the basics. For a lot of the writers you work with, they might not have used Figma before working with you. And then even if they have, they might not be as familiar with it as you are. And that can be intimidating. it can be intimidating to not know like what question should I even ask, or to feel like I don't even know how to use this tool that I need to use. So walk them through the basics. I mean, simple stuff like here's how you move through frames and layers, or hold down Command and click to jump into a text field, start editing it. The basics will go a long way. So yeah, please help out your UX writers with that. Number 3, bring them in early. So I can't tell you how many times a PM or a designer has asked me, when should I loop you into this project? And my answer is usually, I wish you'd loop me in like 2 weeks ago. There's this thing that happens all the time. Let me show you a timeline. Here's a project timeline. Just pretend this is a project timeline. You can see design's been working on the project forever. You can see product's been working on it forever. Engineering got called in weeks ago, and they're actually kind of close to shipping. And suddenly somebody realizes, oh my goodness, this thing is confusing. And they're like, what if we got a writer in here to help us make it not confusing? This happens all the time. The writers get looped in at the last second with this ask to make the thing not confusing. And the bad news is that at this point, there's actually not much that a UX writer can do. You can't fix a confusing UX at this point. You can't. Like, you can use language as a Band-Aid. You can say to the users, this part's tricky, here are the steps, and walk them through it. But it's never going to be a good experience. If you loop writers in earlier, like way earlier, like when you start on the project, bring in the UX writer. The UX writer can help kind of keep you honest and also keep the work honest about what language can and can't do. Writers are really good at spotting these little red flags, these little places where things are confusing that you might not have noticed, like things like a button that has 3 verbs on it. That's going to be confusing. No matter how you write it, that's going to be confusing. And that's a UX problem, really, right? So you can fix that if you spot it earlier. Or writers can notice, hey, the layout we're using on this page forces us to use some sentence structures that won't translate to German. Like, we are attuned to these things, and we can help you find them and make them better as long as you loop us in early. So yeah, please do. Next thing. Number 4. Find your way of jamming together. So different people work differently, right? Like, the way I like to work with a designer is synchronously. Both of us in Figma at the same time working on a thing, like literally designing and writing together and chatting back and forth with our little cursor chat. I love that. Other people do not love that. Other people would rather have some time alone where they can think about the problem and work through some possible solutions before they share something. That's great too. Different people work differently. So please talk with your writer about how they want to work with you and find something that's comfy for both of you. Your goal here is to actually find a way of jamming that's comfortable and gives you a chance to have these little eureka moments, these little light bulb moments where the designer is writing and the writer is designing, and you're kind of pushing and pulling each other's work, and new ideas shake out of that, things you wouldn't have thought of on your own. Those are often the best ideas. And it's so cool when that happens. It's kind of, for me, that's kind of what makes this work rewarding to do it all. So yeah, find a way of jamming together that makes you both comfy so you can have those little moments. All right, and number 5, make room for the mess. I love a messy Figma canvas. I think it's cool. I think it means creative work happened in here and stuff really went down. And I like that, but you might want to contain the mess a little. A designer I used to work with would just simply zoom out. I mean, the canvas is basically infinite. So we just zoom out, draw a rectangle and be like, that's the copy corner. And then I would take stuff up to the copy corner. I do dozens of drafts, find a good thing, and then bring it back down. That's one way you could do this. Other people use different pages, right? A page for writing, a page for design, and some final page where you bring the whole thing together. There are pros and cons to each of these. But something really cool about this is that sometimes writers will feel like they don't really have permission to edit the Figma file. They'll feel nervous about it and like they're not allowed in there, and that stinks. And something you can do as a designer is just make some space for them and then invite them into it. Make that page for copy and say, hey, I made a page for copy. I duplicated everything in there. Will you please come in and help me? Let's jam on this. Let's take a look at it. Yeah, invite them in. Cool. Your relationship with UX writers, 5 ways to make it great. First, give them edit access. Second, show them the ropes. Third, I can't even read this text, it's a little too small. 4th, find your way of jamming together. And 5th, make some room for the mess. Cool. enough about the mushy feelings, let's get down to like brass tacks and the nitty gritty. I want to talk a little bit now about really how should you work together in Figma. It can be awkward at first to have this other person in your Figma files changing stuff, breaking things. And there are a few things you can do that both empower the writer to do their best work and help make sure that they're comfortable and also not necessarily messing up your stuff. So I want to talk about those. I got 5 of these too. First, try to use a consistent file structure, something kind of intuitive. This just makes it easy to find stuff. Like use a cover image that's easy to spot and then clearly organize and name your pages. This is great for the writer. It's also great for everyone else. They can find their way around. Please do it. Number 2, this is a really neat thing you can do. So leaving little statuses throughout the canvas that just tell anybody who's checking it what stuff is work in progress, what stuff is in review, what stuff is ready to build. And particularly what I'd like you to do here is not just do those for design work, but have one for design and one for copy. That way engineers can know, these streams aren't final yet. We shouldn't send them off for translation. You can do this on the canvas. You can also do it in page names so that people can see like, oh, this page is entirely work in progress. This page is entirely done. That's pretty nice. Whatever works for you. Leave little statuses, keep them up to date. Cool. Next. So as you get deeper into a project, it can be hard to keep up with what's changed, especially if it's like one little string inside a huge flow. That can be hard. So something you can do is pick some vibrant color. I like pink. That's really going to stand out and kind of highlight stuff on the canvas that either needs the writer to look at it or recently changed. It's a good way to just track changes, both for you and the writer, but also for engineering and marketing, anyone who cares about what strings are updated. Yeah, little content callouts. Okay, this one has a few parts. So editing someone else's designs can be like a bit daunting and for writers, and it can be scary because you think you're going to break something. There are a few things you can do as a designer to kind of put guardrails in place so that your writer can do their work and your work stays nice. The first one is just alignment, text alignment. Please use it. Lots of times people will just line up the text manually with where they'd like it to be. And when you do that, if a writer makes a change, suddenly things are misaligned. So text alignment, please use it. I have 2 more of these. So the next one is resizing settings on text fields. Resizing helps you enforce space constraints that you have in mind, like having the text expand instead of wrapping. And then using this also gives the writer a sense of how much space they have to work with, which is nice. And then this one's kind of obvious. I hope you're doing it already, but please use auto layout. Please use it. It's wonderful. By defining your layout's behavior ahead of time, your writer really only has to worry about like writing, and then the component will just adjust for the stuff they write. It's fantastic. It feels like magic. Please do this. And keep in mind that the previous 2 things I mentioned, alignment, resizing settings, those affect auto layouts. You kind of need to do all this stuff in tandem. Okay, and this one's like a secret. I don't know, no one does, people don't do this enough. This is like a secret little superpower. Use local components. This is so neat. Yeah, so if you're using the same mock over and over in a flow, you can actually make that a local component. And that way you can make changes to it in just one place and it updates everywhere. But also the writer can make little copy changes in just one place and it'll update everywhere. This is super powerful and very cool. Your writers will love you. And then, okay, if you want to go wild, you can even turn individual strings into components. So say there's like a CTA that the writer's testing a few different options, but the CTA appears everywhere. You can make that a component. And that way the writer can just change that one and see how it kind of cascades down. Shout out to Jason Fox on Twitter. You can find him. This was his idea. It's really smart. Yeah, this is really cool. We've used this here. Chris used this for a project where he was thinking about role names, like editor and viewer. And those things show up everywhere. So by making them components, you can kind of see, here's how it's going to look in the admin dashboard. Here's how it's going to look in the sharing modal. Yeah, this is super powerful, underused. You should do it. Cool. 5 ways of working together in Figma. I think the key here really is just, you want to do this stuff both so that your designs, I guess, are preserved, but also so that the writer feels like they can just do their work and not really worry about messing anything up. Put some little guardrails in place and your writer will love you. Cool, that's what I got. I'm going to hand this off to Chris to bring us home. Chris?
Thanks, Schmidt. Okay, so that was almost it. We're almost through to the end of the manual. There is just one page remaining, and it is, however, the most important page of all. And it is blank. And it's blank because this is the page that you'll fill in with your writer through those chats and coffees and conversations, through those like eureka moments and debates and laughter and just a whole lot of nerding out together. And when your page is ready, we would love to read it. Please, like, send us your tips and your advice and your experiences, your discoveries, your questions. We'll be rolling out posts about UX writing on Figma's blog starting next month. And we'd love to have your ideas in the mix. So please, like, keep us posted on how it's going. Thank you so much for listening to our manual, and enjoy the rest of Config.